Hi, Suzy. Welcome to the show.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So tell us your journey to becoming an NYU professor and teaching Becoming You and making this into a course.
Oh, well, I did not realize that this podcast was 6 hours long. I have one of those careers that is a long and winding road, but I will give you the very Cliff Notes version of it, which is that I started off my career as a journalist. In fact, I was a crime reporter in Miami during the like riots and the sort of Miami Vice era, which was a great way to learn about life very quickly. I was serendipitously assigned to cover business, and I found my true love in business. I ended up going to Harvard Business School to learn more about business, and then began my career as a business journalist, which brought me ultimately to be a broadcast journalist covering careers, which was my area of focus. And life was going along. I was working on the Today Show and CNBC, and really liking it very much. But then. COVID happened and my husband passed away, and I had a gigantic reset with the rest of the world. And everybody had a reset. I had sort of a double whammy. And when I came out of that reset, I knew that I had a methodology that I had tested and I thought was a really strong methodology to help people determine their purpose in life. I had been working on it for years and years and years. And I approached NYU and I said, "Hey, I have a class I wish I had taken in business school. It's called Becoming You, How to Craft Your Authentic Life and Career." And they said, "Okay, let's give it a try." And it was a marvelous experiment. It took off. It became a very popular class. I was asked to join the faculty as a full professor, which I did, and I teach now management and Becoming You, which I love equally, to tell you the truth. So
Well,
that's the Cliff Notes version.
we appreciate the Cliff Note version. And also, I feel like what a timely experiment to run. It's like post-COVID. I mean, I think we're all forever, it will be this post-COVID era where you're very focused on like, what am I doing with my life? Where am I spending the majority of my time? And if you work, probably at work. And what is that work and how does it relate to your purpose? I know I had not the same experience, but similar in the sense of questioning what am I doing? And for me, I feel like the chunks of time are maybe every 5 years or every 10 years, I start to really get this like reflective itch. So that's really fascinating. So tell us about the process of turning this into a book. So Becoming You is a course, it's incredibly popular. And I assume people were saying, hey, I don't go to NYU, but I
Right.
want to do this, right?
Yeah, there was just a lot of students who took it, and they were like, "I think my brother needs to take this. My mother needs to take this." And NYU was very gracious in allowing me to start opening it to the public and teaching it in workshops, which was great. But then, I just couldn't be doing those all the time, and there were a lot. I don't want to sound like a jerk, but there were a lot of people saying, "How can we get this methodology to more people?" And I said, "Okay, well, I have my podcast, blah blah blah." And there was still this kind of drumbeat. How do we get the methodology so that people can really do it like they do it in your class? And I didn't want to write a book because writing books are hard and tedious and long and lonely and torture. And I was complaining about this on a walk through the woods with my daughter. I have four children, all in their 30s now. And I was in the woods with my daughter, Eve, who's an artist. She's an art therapist, actually. And she's usually the most sympathetic ear. She's usually like, peace, love, and happiness, mom. Put on your clogs and let's have some chai latte. And she's usually like, don't do anything you don't want to do. And we were walking in the woods, and I was saying to her, I don't want to write this book. And she literally grabbed me by the arm and she said, you know, you have to write the book. And I was like, what? Not you, Eve. And I was like, you turned on me. And she basically, her argument was that people needed it. And she'd seen it, the methodology change people's lives and also my life. Like she'd seen me really change from not just the methodology, but all the tools that it has all these tools associated with it, where people were finally able to identify their values, which is like, that's the holy grail when you know your values. And Becoming You has a methodology where you actually can get a list of your values in order and which ones have conflict. And she was like, you can't keep this for yourself. It's not right. Then she said a funny thing, which is, it was, I mean, this maybe is generational or maybe I don't know, but she said this wild thing, which was, she said, I just don't want some man taking this idea and putting his name on it. You got to claim it for your own mom. And I don't know if that's the one that tipped me over the edge. I didn't think anybody would do that, but I thought that I'm always telling women to go claim their authentic selves. And this was my authentic self. And it came out of the mouth of a babe, a 31-year-old babe, to tell me. And I went back to the house and I called my publisher from my previous books who had been really eager to have me do it. And I said to her, okay, you're lucky Eve exists. My daughter Eve exists because I'm going to write that book. And she was like, fantastic. So that's how it came to be.
Well, we're also very happy that you wrote it. Thanks for going through the pain and the tears and the process for us. Okay, before we get into the skill set that all the bosses need, because like you said, you've worked in careers, you've worked in management, you kind of have this overlapping becoming you. So I feel like you have this wide range of information and knowledge that's really helpful in our careers. But I want to, before we get into sort of the skill that helps people specifically at work with their boss, I want to talk about the methodology. Can we have kind of an overview of what becoming you really helps people get to the finish line with?
Yes, I mean, becoming you is a deceptively simple premise. I mean, it basically says that your purpose lies at the intersection of your deeply held values, which unfortunately most people do not know their values, or they're repressing them or sublimating them. So your values, which you have to figure out, your unique aptitudes, which is what you're good at cognitively and emotionally. So what you're really good at, there's eight big cognitive aptitudes, and then there's your emotional, your personality. And then your economically viable interests, the work that calls you intellectually and emotionally that also can pay you what you want and need to be paid. So there's three big data sets, your values, your aptitudes, and your economically viable interests. And we do the work of excavating them, and then we find the stuff that's right at the intersection of those three buckets. And for some people, that's one blessed thing. And for other people, there's like three or four things. And then we talk about how you're going to get there. But that's the methodology. I mean, it's not a hack. I wish it was, but it's not. You do have to do some self-reflection. You do have to take some tests. You do have to do some activities. But we've successfully done it thousands of times now, and people get to their what we call your area of transcendence, but it's just another word for purpose.
Well, this is an interesting segue into you recently wrote in a CNBC article about the underrated power of execution. And I feel like execution is something, yes, obviously at work, and we're going to talk about that, but really in becoming you, you can do all this work. And if you don't execute on it, then what's the point of it, right? So
Right.
execution is this like skill that, yes, your boss
Yeah.
wants, you should want too for your career.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I think execution is my students at NYU are bright and shiny and fabulous in every way, and they come in and they want to be leaders. They want to be told they're leaders, and then I tell them, guess what? Leadership also involves execution, and they're like, "Ah." And then we test. We have a couple of tests that actually have them find out how the world experiences them in terms of being people who get things done. And when you're trying to figure out what your aptitudes are, which is the second bucket of the becoming you data sets, is what you're really good at, you need to know how the world experiences you in terms of your execution. Almost everyone tells themselves that they're good at executing because they have an excuse for why they don't. It's not their fault. And so it's really important to understand not what you think about your execution abilities, but how the world sees your execution abilities. So we have a little test that finds that out.
I would love to take this test.
We'll send
I'm
it to you. It takes 5 minutes. I mean, it's a fantastic little test. I invented this test because it drove me out of my everlasting mind that this test did not exist.
And
So,
people, to your point, everyone thinks they're a great
oh,
executor. And maybe this is a
everyone
kind way nice to say maybe you're not.
it tests you on three things. It tests you on how you are with people, because guess what, Lauren? Everyone thinks they're great with people also. Okay. And then it tests you on your execution, how well you get things done, how reliable you are, and it tests you on the quality of your ideas. Most people are pretty realistic about how good their ideas are. That's the one where people have the best self-awareness. But when it comes to people and execution, most people rate themselves much more highly than the world is willing to tell them. So it's a big surprise.
That is, I will say, being back in the corporate world, I can see this, but I'm just laughing because, you know, with AI, I think of people also, you talked about ideas. I am a little worried that people who think they're great executors. AI will help them execute if they're not. Like, I guess maybe I should be worried about this. Maybe I should be happy about the fact that AI can help you kind of brainstorm better ideas, give you feedback. So maybe those people can kind of come up in that category. The people who are just not great at following through, I don't know if
Yeah.
there's enough AI to get that personality trait through, right?
AI is never going to be able to execute on some things for us. I mean, it's just never going to be able to. It can help us in so many ways. But I'm a big fan of AI. I think it does amazing things. But I've been fighting with it all day because it's sort of been hallucinating on me in a project I'm doing. And at one point earlier today, I said, gosh darn it, I'm just going to write this myself, as if this was this huge imposition. My entire life I've been writing
Yeah.
myself, but I was getting used to it. So, AI, look, execution ultimately is a human skill, and
Yeah.
it's ever more valuable.
Totally. So in the article, you tell a story about a student who was devastated by the 360 feedback that praised her execution skills. Why do you think being called an operator feels like an insult to so many aspiring leaders? I feel like they look at it as like, if I'm an operator, then I don't get to be a strategy person, right? And
Right.
strategy always seems like the
Oh,
like shiny store.
yeah, it's the shiny new thing. It's like you want to be a leader, you want to be a strategist, you want to be a visionary. And like it seems like an operator is the grunty, bureaucratic, managerial opposite of visionary. And we're habitualized and socialized from a very young age to want to be a leader. You're in fourth grade and your parents are telling you to be elected captain of the soccer team. They are. And we're just told that you want to be considered leader. And so a lot of great leaders are also operating or they are surrounded by operators. This student that you're referring to just was devastated. And she said, you have to teach me how to be a leader because I just was called this great operator. And she was so offended. I was like, many people will be fighting in the square for you because to a person who actually gets things done is a rare and wonderful thing. And I said to her, do you want to be a leader? And there was this long pause, and she said, not really. I kind of find strategy meetings to be very boring. I can't stand all the yammering away about vision statements. I actually just give me something to do and let me finish it. That feels good. I said, I think you're an operator, and that's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, the whole point of becoming you is knowing who you authentically are so that you can spend your whole life doing what you're good at, which feels very good and usually accounts for your success. So I think she ultimately the student made a lot of peace. She made peace with being an operator and she went out looking for COO jobs. And last I heard, I haven't talked to her for about a year, but last I heard she was very, very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely relate more to being someone who is a an operator than someone who is a strategist. And to your point, I always looked at that before as sort of like the lesser than, like the people who are with the busy work, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm good at it. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Someone will pay
Yeah.
me for it. So it comes back to the becoming you framework.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, execution is obviously a skill that bosses want. Is that because what you have integrity when you say you're going to do something, you get it done because you're able to work on projects that are impactful? Like, what is it specifically about execution that bosses like so much? And if you are, at work, how can you kind of, I don't know, self-advocate for your execution skills?
Yeah. You don't have to self-advocate for them because when you do it, it speaks for themselves. It speaks for itself and it is noticed. If you're a person who gets things done, a boss will say, she gets it done. I can always count on her. Now, an interesting thing about integrity is a word used in business all the time. And when I ask my students to define it, even my executive MBAs who are in their 30s and 40s, I ask them to define integrity and they would say knowing right from wrong, doing the right thing when no one's looking. And I'm like, yeah. Well, that's half of it because in business, integrity is actually doing what you say and following through, getting things early on and on time. And so that is business integrity as well. All those things, those are ticket to the game, okay, to know right from wrong and to do the right thing. But like you get this reputation for being so reliable and to be counted on and to be a stand-up person if you actually execute, early on time and better. If you deliver a project like, 3 days early, better than everyone expected, with no holes in it, with no excuses about it being late, but it just being there perfect every single time, that's money in the bank.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a unique trait.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, the execution skills. Is this something that you just like is part of your personality, it's who you are? Can you learn how to be a better executor? And maybe if you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, I do struggle with the follow through. I'm always saying it will be done on Monday and having to check it on Thursday, or people are chasing me down. Yeah, like what do you do?
Okay, so first thing I would say is, again, I have to really reiterate that a lot of people are not candid with themselves about their execution skills. So if you are listening to this and you're thinking, it's not my forte, I applaud you because you're one of the few people who actually knows. Most people have an internal dialogue where they tell themselves they're pretty good executors. So again, I would suggest that you ask somebody that you really trust, hey, on a scale from 1 to 10, what would you give me as on execution? If they're not giving you a 10, I'd be very because they're not going to say to your face, this is why I like the test because it's anonymous. But if you can't take the test or don't want to take the test, you can just ask people around you to give you a rating and see how many tens you get. Okay, now to your other question, can you fix it? Of course you can. Of course you can, because it's in you. I mean, and it's definitely driven by personality and it's driven by life circumstances and it's driven by all sorts of things if we're not great executors. But I've seen people get a lot better at it. And you can get a lot better at it by making it your focus. And by saying, okay, all right, I'm late on everything. I'm going to start backing out my timing so that by Monday, X will be done. On Tuesday, X will be done. And this is in us. This is a fixable skill. There are skills that are really, really important for leadership that are very hard to fix. And I would put in that bucket, since I mentioned it, I would put in that bucket, for instance, stamina. Stamina is an absolute essential element of being promoted and running teams. And I'm talking about physical and mental stamina. Now more than stamina has always mattered in business. Now more than ever, with the pace of business, the ambiguity of business, the changeability of business, stamina. I mean, stamina has always mattered. I've never seen it matter so much. And my career is long. And remember, I sit on corporate boards and I run company, and I just have seen, I can see this from every direction. So, and I hear what executives say about some of their criticism of the younger generations is where's their stamina, is basically what they're saying. So stamina is pretty hard to change. That is sort of a personality thing, and sometimes it's just a physiological thing. But execution is not in that category. Execution is within our power to repair. We just have to really, really want to and put the systems in to do it. And so we can do it if we put our minds to it.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking of execution. There are times where you need to get the job done and it can be a B plus, and then there are other times where you need to get the job done and it needs to be A plus plus. How do you think about that in sort of like quality of work? Like, is it more important to get it done or get it done perfectly? I think of this like kind of perfectionist trap that sometimes people will get stuck in. Like, and how do you decipher that maybe in your level of execution?
Yeah, this is about your values, okay? Because if you value achievement, achievement's one of the 15 human values, okay? And that means that you want to have what we call seen success, success that is measured, noticed, and observed. And people say, wow, that person has a lot of achievement. Some people value achievement. It's with some of my students, it's in their top three, and other people, it's sort of down 6 or 7. If you value achievement, I'm a person with a high achievement, and this might be generational, but it might be personality, but it's one of my top values. It's not my top, but it's one of my top values. Then there is no B plus ever. Everything is A plus. Okay, you get everything in on time, you get everything done better. There is no B plus project. There is no, oh, okay, this one doesn't really matter because your boss doesn't feel that way. And your boss is covering for you your boss has political capital and you use up your boss's political capital every time you hand in a B. So that having been said, you can have achievement as a relatively lower value. I have, as I mentioned, 4 children, and not all of my children have high achievement. I have a son who has very, very high family centrism. He's a father, he's got 2 kids. He loves his work, but it's not the most important thing to him. And I dare say he hands in a lot of B projects, and his career will reflect that. But it's not his value, so he doesn't really care. He'll be promoted at a slower rate, and he's totally at peace with that because he knows what his values are. So I think that this is optional, to your question based on your values and how much you want to be a person with high achievement. So that may
What
not
if
matter to you at all. So
What if your boss is a high achiever? Like they love execution, they love everything being great, they want good ideas, and they expect a really high stamina. Like every day, I want you to execute perfectly. Every day, I want good ideas. Is that a values misalignment if you start to see that? Yeah.
you nailed it. That's it, Lauren. You nailed it. Okay, if you don't share those, then you have a values misalignment. So I'm not to nerd out on you, but except for that I'm about to nerd out on you. Your happiness times at work are your happiest times are when your values align with your bosses, your supervisor, the research would show your supervisor's values and your organization's values. So all of the 15 values, you can have them as an individual, but companies have them and supervisors have them. And so when you have friction and you hate your company or you're such like, I can't stand my boss. I know they're a good person, but I can't. What's going on is their top values are probably achievement, work centrism, okay, which is how much you want to organize your life around your work, and maybe affluence, okay, which is how much money you make. And you may have those values as number 7, 8, 9, because your top value is what we call eudaimonia, which is self-care, pleasure, recreation. I mean, most people between the ages of 20 and 30, 65% of people between 20, and we have to do this by gender soon, but we're right now just have the bulk data, have eudaimonia, 65% of eudaimonia is their top value. And so you're going to have a values misalignment. This is actually sort of what's going on in the workplace when your boss is an oldster like me and you're valuing achievement, work centrism, affluence, and other things that are sort of more traditional. And you have younger members of your workforce who have as their top values things like eudaimonia, and then the value we have for travel, which is scope. And it's a values mismatch. And you gotta I don't like people to live inauthentically. I think there's just no way you're going to work that out. So I think that it's a journey to finding an organization that's more closely aligned with your values.
How do you, if someone is job searching right now, obviously it's a tough job market. There's been a lot of layoffs. How do you, so you might feel like I got to take a job even if it's not aligned to my values. What's your advice for people who are job searching right now and want to do this? They're like, I want to be aligned values wise with my next role. Where do I find these little hints that I would be before I apply for a job, or signs I should apply for the job?
I think that what you say, it's true. It is a tough job market, and you do end up taking a job where you are walking in the door knowing there's a values misalignment. But remember, your career, even though it doesn't feel like it in the moment, your career is a long journey, and it's a journey towards finding that alignment with your purpose and the organization's purpose, and finding that values alignment with working in a company that just feels like everything fits right. You're wearing a suit that just fits perfectly. They have a certain value. One of the values, for instance, is belonging, which is how much you do stuff together. It's the community value, and you may be very, very high on belonging. You loved being in a sorority. You like company softball teams, and if you're a high belonging person in a company that really doesn't value that at all, individual contributors, everybody working at home, you're gonna be uncomfortable with that. And eventually you're going to find your way to a company that has higher belonging. My suggestion would be know what your values are. Okay. Because it's pretty easy to know what a company's values are. You can even find them out during the interview process. Companies like to tell you their values because they don't want a mismatch. They
Right.
want you to. One question I would say is if you're in the job interview process and they're saying to you, do you have any more questions? You could say, yes. Can you help me understand what kind of people shouldn't work here? And this catches people so off guard that they usually just state their values right out. Like, oh, well, if you don't like, hearing from your boss on a weekend, you're probably not a person who should work here. And then right away, you kind of start to intuit the organization's values. So you got to see your career as a journey. You won't get the perfect match in the first job or the second. Typically, sometimes you want that, but you'll get your way there.
hmm I love that advice. I feel like, I work at a fully remote company, but when we got together for an in-person event not long ago, we were actually talking about a value that we all share. And we were at this event and we were literally, they had ordered stickers. It was magnets that came. So we had to turn the magnets into a sticker. And you're like, this is so silly. We're like in this assembly line doing this thing, but it's an event, and you're there in person. What do? You have to make the best of it. And I was like, you know what type of people work really well here? The person who can like get themselves out of a paper box, and it's sort of like, but with no instructions. And to your point, that works for me. I like the puzzle part of that. I'm okay with that. I like being like, oh, we ordered stickers, magnets showed up. Let's figure out how to fix this and we'll just get to it. I could see that not being aligned to someone else's value who's like, I don't like that. I don't want the uncertainty. I don't like the, no directions, whatever it is. And so it's just interesting because I think employees actually do have these type of conversations out loud with each other. I think especially sometimes when they're in person,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you start to realize like this is what we have in common is we all kind of share this value or something
Yeah.
like that.
I actually, I think there may be a value going on there, okay, but I'm going to get really nerdy right now. I think you're actually talking about an aptitude. Okay, so aptitudes are are the way your brain's wired, and what you just described to me is a brain wiring that I would call inductive reasoning, which is that you just sort of see a problem and in your mind you start working it out right away. And this is really different from people who on the same continuum are process supporters, where they like routine, they like things to be very predictable, they like directions, they like to keep the pipes in their grooves. And people, your organization needs and wants people with certain aptitudes. And sometimes it's incredibly painful if you're an inductive reasoner and you're in an organization that's all process supporters or vice versa.
Yeah.
And in another case, I mean, sometimes you're a generalist. You like to know one fact about everything. That's me. You're sort of very broad. You want to read a book. You want to read like Cher's memoir, but also the history of Japan. Okay. You want to know a little bit. And there are many fields where generalists are really needed, but other kinds of jobs really need a specialist where you just need to know every last thing in the whole world about the history of Japan. Okay. And you just want to dig as deep as it goes. And so it's like a brain wiring thing. And it's very painful when a generalist finds themselves in a specialist job or vice versa. And this is why it's so important to know ourselves and to know what our aptitudes are. I mean, our aptitudes are set. Our cognitive aptitudes are set by age 15.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's
yeah,
interesting.
it is. And you can find out what yours are. I mean, it's just, and yet we can go our whole lives not knowing this data. And when my students test for it, there's just so much relief in the room. I remember a student coming up to me after getting her test results back on her cognitive aptitudes saying, this explains everything. This is why I got fired from my last job. This is why I need this kind of job. And I was like, yeah, imagine this data is there for all of us. And so if you're listening to this and you're either looking for a job or in a job, and you are not clear on what your aptitudes are and what aptitudes they want, this is an important data match you need to make.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're giving us the data, but also like the language on, okay, you've been feeling this way, and we're
Yeah.
gonna put words
Yeah.
to help you
Yeah.
articulate
It
it.
is about a language. I mean, and I think that there's this fantastic quote by a German philosopher, and it says, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." And when we have a language to talk about these things, to talk about our values and to talk about our aptitudes, we are so much better at finding our purpose and thriving in our jobs because we have words to talk about it.
Yeah.
I used to say to my kids when they were little, there are words for everything. Like they'd be crying and they'd be like, I would say, what's wrong? And they couldn't tell me what was wrong and they'd be crying so hard. I'd say, come on, find your words. There's words for everything. And there are words that explain where and how we should work.
Yeah, I think actually, because I have two toddlers, and it's funny because I'm always saying that to them, like,
Yeah,
use your words, like, tell me how you feel, try to name it. It's so
right.
fun.
And the minute they can tell you, everything changes.
Yeah,
When they can
absolutely.
finally explain themselves, when they can finally explain themselves,
Well,
everything changes.
I think the clarity of knowing sort of who you are, why you're wired this way, and what you're looking for not only helps you, but it helps you. A lot of managers are out there saying, what are you interested in? Where would you be a good fit? But we
Yeah,
can't do that test
yeah,
for you, that kind of
right.
thing. So
That's right.
you're helping your boss. Okay, as we wrap up, I want to talk about some very specific, maybe daily habits that someone can do to be a better executor at work. What are some of your favorite habits? And maybe it's not even about execution. I think because you have such a wide range of knowledge, just like what are some of the daily habits that you see successful people do?
Um, Okay, I mean it's going to be a little different than execution if you don't mind, because
Yeah.
with execution, look, everybody has a different way of getting execution right. For me, execution came pretty naturally. It's just a personality thing, so I'm not sure I'm the best source of saying here's how you execute. But I'm sure you could ask ChatGPT and get some good answers on
Yeah,
it.
I'm
I mean,
sure.
for me, I think that two things changed the trajectory of my career, and I'm really grateful they happened when I was really young. And one was this understanding that every single person you met was a mentor. There wasn't one big mentor in the sky who was going to come down on a white steed and carry you off and clear the roads and sort of make your career perfect for you. And that, in fact, every single person that you met knew something you didn't know, and you could learn from them. And you didn't have to say to them, "You're my mentor," or in any way identify yourself to them. That it wasn't like a relationship that was all consuming. I mean, I one time was I was talking with a woman who's a very well-known business person, and I said to her sort of offhandedly, "You've been a mentor to me for so many years," and she said, "I have." And I said, "Oh yes, I am a student watching your every move." And I mean, she had no idea, and she still is a huge mentor to me. So I think that mindset that people older, younger, colleagues of mine. Like when I was a young girl reporter in Miami, there was another reporter, Liz Balmaceda, and I remember thinking everything she does is better than me. Like she's just so good. She went on to win two Pulitzer Prizes, so I was not wrong about that observation. And I just watched her with her sources, and I just learned from her. So that was one really big thing, is just to learn from everybody. And the second thing that I realized really early on, and it was probably in those years in Miami that I learned this, is that networking is a joke and you shouldn't waste your time with it. And I think that networking is mercenary and boring and everyone hates it. And it's just better to be friends with everybody and not, to be besties with everybody, that just, you have a human relationship with somebody. You're using people is inherently wrong. And yet that's what networking asks us to do. And that's why we recoil every time we're networking. I remember a student saying to me, "I make 50 networking calls a week." And I said, "How's that going for you?" And he said, "Nothing yet." And I remember thinking to myself, "Man, nothing ever," because it's not how it goes. And so I think if you change your mindset and just say, "I want to have relationships with people who are different than me, people who do not have any immediate appearance that they may help or change my life," they will eventually, just like you will help and change their life by dint of friendship. So that would be my other piece of daily advice, which is just who have you, who don't you know in your office, in your life that you could get to know better?
Yeah, I think being relationship minded as like a mindset shift from versus how can this person maybe help
Yeah.
my career? I want to network with this person so I can ask them for feedback. I want to talk to them so I can ask them for a referral, whatever it is. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with those. Those are great tips. Suzy, let everyone know where they can learn more about you, follow your work, and your book is called Becoming You. I would assume it's everywhere where books are sold, but you correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it is. It is. I hope it is, or I hope it's sold out where place where books are sold. So it's called Becoming You: The Proven Method for Crafting Your Authentic Life and Career. You can start with my podcast, which is also called Becoming You, on every platform. My newsletter, if you can sign up for it. It's absolutely free. It's on my website, SuzyWelch.com, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn, all the usual places you would find me. And I'm out there bloviating every day. So please come find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll put all of that in the show notes.
All right. Thanks so much, Lauren.